Hello, welcome back. We are at episode 34 of the series Gita Decoded, and in this episode we will be looking at the synopsis of what is contained in chapter 8 together with Sister Denise, who has been kind enough to share her time and wisdom with us. Sister Denise, a very, very warm welcome back.
Thank you.
I'm certain by this time you have a number of viewers already riveted to your understanding of the Bhagavad Gita. So tell me, chapter 8, what does it say to you in its entirety?
In chapter 8, we're really seeing the two goals, mukti, jivan mukti. We're learning about nirvana, Brahman, the world of light. We're learning about the final goal, which is to take incarnation in the next kalpa, in the pure world. And we're learning exactly how to meditate, exactly how to practice to be bodiless in preparation for leaving this world.
Now, Sister Denise, we have touched on this subject earlier, but having heard what you said, there will be individuals who, although they understand it, will find it very reluctant to prepare oneself for death because it's a subject that nobody wants to touch. You know, how does that old expression go? Everyone wants to go to heaven, but no one wants to die. Okay, so something like that. Okay, so tell me, what do we do from now on to live within the law of karma in such a way that our final moments will be what we want them to be, rather than a negative experience? I once heard a medical doctor say that every person does so with a feeling of regret. How can we live in such a way that that is not the case?
You know, I think that the question of death becomes relevant to a person at a certain time. Until that time, you don't want to think about death at all. It's not the right time. The Gita covers everything. And I think that this particular chapter, where we're really talking about preparation for death, will be relevant to the person who starts thinking about their death anyway. As soon as you start thinking about it for whatever reason, then you say, well, I need to know about this. Everything is there in the Gita, but you will take the bit that's relevant to you at the time. So if somebody is engaged in their karma, they want to do correct karma, they want to have a connection with God, good, they'll do that. When the question of death comes up in their life, maybe they lose someone. Maybe something happens to them, they're told, okay, you have a life-threatening illness, you have this much time to live. That's when it really becomes relevant, you see. So I think that it may be that you will say to yourself, okay, this chapter, very fine, but it's not relevant to me right now. When it becomes relevant to me, then I'll take a look at it.
But what you're saying is that it's not something we should avoid, is it?
Well, you know, we avoid it when we avoid it, and then we can't avoid it endlessly. A time comes when we have to deal with it. And when death comes, or moving on, transitioning, however words you want to put to it, you will say to yourself, okay, now I need to know about this. So here we are.
Another aspect that struck me about chapter 8 is one's relationship with one's body. It was very clear signals given and instructions given as to how you should relate to your body. This is also related to the subject of preparing yourself to die, is it not?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's talking about the gates, you see, because you're a soul, incorporeal. You have a body, and you also have a mind, your intellect, the different faculties of consciousness. Okay, the soul cannot have contact with the real world, we say the material world, without a body. You cannot have contact. And so the way that the soul has contact with the world is these gates, your sense organs. So these give you the possibility of connecting with the world, but they also take you away from yourself. So what we're trying to do as a Raj Yogi is to have connection with the world and be able to, not be all the time outside the gates. Most people, they live on the surface of their bodies and they operate in the external world, and the mind is completely engaged in the sense organs and the objects of sense perception. So preparing for death means you're going to leave your body. So you practice closing the gates and you practice being independent of your body. You practice withdrawing so that you get used to being bodiless and comfortable with it. And then when the right day arrives, you say, okay, I'm ready, goodbye. But, to be dragged out of your body, it sometimes is said, death will pull you with its claws. You don't want to be, as it were, killed by death. You want to be the person who says, okay, now I recognize my time has come. I am leaving this body by my own volition. So your volition, time, everything coincides, and you say, okay, I go.
I like that expression that you used, to be independent of the body. The reality is, very few of us are, because this is home. This is home.
It is home, but then you are not your home.
Yeah, but this is home. And there's a very deep reluctance to live elsewhere, move out, evict yourself.
Yes.
We're reluctant to do so.
Of course.
Sister Denise, my question is, why is this particular lesson so difficult to grasp? It is so, whatever you say makes perfect sense. However, it is so difficult to grasp and to practice.
Well, we have to come to terms with our mortality. We are immortal, but we are mortal as well. We have mortal bodies. And you see, we become attached to our bodies, which makes us mortals. It is said for the people who are in the day of Brahma, the people who are in the world of Satyuga, they're not attached to their bodies. And so for a person in that period of time, the soul is so powerful, the body is so pure, that leaving the body is not an issue. But it is at this time where we are so fused with the body, we identify with the body, we know it's home, but then we're attached to home, or even we will say, not this is home, this is me. To say, I am, you take a photograph of yourself and you say, that's me. You never say, that's my image. That's me. We say, this is me. But really to become soul conscious, to detach from the body, to realize this is not me, this is my body. And this is my instrument, and it is temporary, and I am not temporary. So the thing is, we have to get used to the idea that in the long period of time, of eternity, the soul is eternal. I pass through many bodies. And each and every one of them are mine, but you don't remember your previous birth. You don't know your next birth. You become associated with this body, and the association with it creates the attachment, which we saw in earlier chapters. And the attachment means when you have to separate from it, it is traumatic. This is why this chapter is important.
So the subject of birth and rebirth was also emphasized in chapter right? And I think the message of reincarnation was necessary for us to hear.
Now, you know, there are a lot of people who have very different ideas about reincarnation. There are some people who feel that, you know, you reincarnate through the species, and the ultimate rebirth is the human rebirth, and then from the human birth you go to nirvana. Then in Brahma Kumaris we say differently. We say that I'm a human soul, I take human births. So it may be in a male form or a female form, but I will not take birth as a dog or a cat or an elephant or something like this. Then there are other people, many people in this world, they say there's nothing like reincarnation. It's a big deal. So, you know, somebody who says, well, there is no reincarnation, they will not be interested in this. But you see, in India, in the system of Hinduism, majority of people do believe in reincarnation, but they don't necessarily think about it that much, or dwell on, okay, if I reincarnate, then I must pay attention to my karma, I must understand my soul. But those who do, they are drawn to the Gita because the Gita talks about it. You see, I mean, there are people in other religious faith traditions who believe in reincarnation even though their religion says there isn't. You see, I mean, for example, myself, I was raised in the Christian tradition, but I always believed in reincarnation. I don't know where that came from, but I remember in my youth, you know, among students, among school children, people would ask each other, you know, do you believe in reincarnation? And I would always say, well, yes, of course. And others would say, well, absolutely not, you know. So people come from different spaces, even independently of the teachings of their own religion, which is quite a phenomenon.
Yeah. Okay, Sister Denise, let us speak a bit about Brahma. It's a pivotal character in the entire story of the Bhagavad Gita, and his name comes up a few times. It's a he, okay? His name comes up a few times in chapter 8, and you've explained his role, what he does, etc. Does every soul on earth have a relationship with Brahma?
I feel that Brahma is very important. Brahma is known as the creator, but also among Brahma Kumaris we will say, no, Brahma is not the creator, Shiva is the creator, incorporeal God is the creator, Brahma is the instrument through whom Shiva performs the act of creation. This is how we think. And so then Brahma is a person who is an instrument of God for creation, and then Vishnu, an instrument of God for sustenance, and then we will say Shankar is an instrument of God for destruction, or the word used in the Gita translation that we're working with here is dissolution, which is less horrific, you know. So Brahma, we would say, is the soul who passes through the entire cycle, which is why we say there is the day of Brahma. So when the soul of Brahma is in the state of illumination as Vishnu, and then in the state of darkness, Brahma, in the night of Brahma. So the soul passes through the whole cycle. And so we would say the same soul Brahma is the same soul Vishnu. In the Satopradhan state Vishnu or Krishna, in the Tamopradhan state Brahma, and then we would go further as to say Arjuna is the same soul as well. So Arjuna is someone in particular, but also anyone. You see, so because the Gita is also an allegory, so there are some parts which we will say is historical, some parts allegorical, some parts symbolic, and it's really quite a complex piece of work to interpret, you see. So what we're giving in this series is our interpretation of the Gita in the light of the teachings that we're receiving within the Brahma Kumaris World Spiritual University, in which we understand that Shiva is speaking the Gita knowledge at this time through the instrument Brahma, who we call Prajapita Brahma, at the time when there will be a great world war, at the time when each and every one of us are in the battlefield of our lives. So it's happening on lots of different levels, and it is absolutely fascinating to be living at such a time.
Sister Denise, the reader meets Arjuna and Sri Krishna on the battlefield, and I feel that every chapter is Sri Krishna arming Arjuna with more and more weapons to fight the battle of life, to play the game. Now, having been so armed, what is it incumbent upon Arjuna to do with this that we've learned in chapter 8? Because to know is one thing, to become something else. Now that he's been so armed, what is the way forward for Arjuna and all of us?
It's interesting when you put this in terms of the battlefield and Krishna and Arjuna in the chariot with the 5 horses and all of the symbolic value there. Arjuna is learning much, much more than just go and fight.
Yeah.
You know, he's learning whatever you need to learn as a human spirit, you see. And then when we get into chapter 9 is talking about the Raj Vidya, which is going to be very interesting to look at. But he is being really prepared to be the king, who, after having won the war, he then has to take on the kingdom and run the kingdom. So he is learning what you need to know as a human spirit in the highest possible position of responsibility. So God is really preparing him for much more than just life, you know. It's the ultimate preparation.
Mm-hmm. Now, Sister Denise, the aspect of practicality and reality is something that I always wish to bear in mind as one is reading the Bhagavad Gita, because we've established at the beginning of our discussion that the Bhagavad Gita is relevant today as it was at the time in which it was written. Okay, so here we find ourselves in the 21st century with a myriad of responsibilities that we ourselves have chosen, and very busy lives, and in a world that has become anything but spiritual. How do you, somebody who really, really loves God and somebody who really wishes to be with God, how do you pull that off in this day and age?
Very, very interesting question. You know, one of the things I'm aware of is people, when they reach the end of their careers and they have to retire, 65, 67, whatever it is, you've got a huge amount of life still to go, and there's no preparation for it, you see. What do you do in retirement? So a lot of people, they get into philanthropy and volunteer work and things like this, but we have this whole other aspect, which is, you know, you're looking at your life, okay, you did everything you had to do in a worldly sense, but now you're really looking at the meaning of life. Not even further than the purpose of life. What is the meaning of me existing? And I think when you start looking at your existence in terms of trying to find meaning, it only really has substantial meaning if you're looking at yourself in the context of your relationship with God. You see, because from the point of view of the whole world, what is the meaning of humanity? And the meaning of humanity also is only given meaning in the light of its sacredness, and its relationship with God gives it sacredness. Otherwise, life is just actually quite meaningless. And it is out of that that you get things like the existentialist philosophies, which emerged actually around the same historical period as the Rajyoga knowledge that we study in Brahma Kumaris, which is the 1920s, the 1930s, the 1940s, also in the context of the Second World War, in which 67 million people were killed. And that is huge. And since that time, the world population has doubled and tripled and quadrupled. And what we're facing in the 21st century now is another possibility of world war, which is very scary. There's a lot of conflict going on. There's a lot of difficulty happening in people's hearts and minds, because those who belong to privileged parts of the world are being invaded by people running away from dangerous parts of the world who are just coming to get a better life. But it's not possible that it's going to be a better life, because it's all going to change because of a huge influx of population. So everything is getting very, very confused at the present time. And I think that that mirrors the confusion of Arjuna. A lot of people are confused, not because of having to fight, having to kill, but there's a lot of confusion. Okay, how do I position myself vis-a-vis what's happening immediately around me? I think in the past, you look at the news on television and it's things happening far away. It's not like that now. You look out of the window, you look on the TV, it's the same thing. So it's closing in on us, and that is really asking us to think, okay, what am I? Who am I? What am I supposed to be doing? And there is where you find yourself saying, God, explain what's happening, because you can't explain it, you can't figure it out, what's going on. And you hear this a lot among people, they will call us up in the centers and they'll say, do you realize what's going on? The world is collapsing. How am I supposed to relate to this, you see? So the circumstances are really pushing people towards trying to make sense of it, not politically or sociologically or anthropologically, but really spiritually. This is coming up, you see. So I think the fact that we're trying to interpret this ancient scripture in the light of the present time is very, very timely.
Wow. Okay, on that high note, we will have to bring today's episode to a close. Yeah, there's not much more that I can say from my side, except that I think if you're watching this episode and hearing what Sister Denise has to say about the Bhagavad Gita, what it means and what it contains, you are not alone into thinking that you never realized that the Bhagavad Gita was so deep, so meaningful, and so practical to the life that you are currently leading. And so I hope this particular episode and all other episodes have given you some food for thought and have, in a sense, forced you to re-evaluate your life in the way you've been leading it, and especially to rethink and re-look at what your relationship is with God. For your time and for your energy today, I thank you for joining us, and thank you, Sister Denise. Do take care, and we'll see you soon. and we'll see you at home soon again. Bye.